Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 176 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans and Husker fans.
Hello, everybody. We are back, a father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. We are back to recording remotely, but the college football season has officially started, so we are back to Dad's favorite time of the year.
Yes. It was, and it's really nice to actually be talking about a victory for the first time since 2017?
I did see, I saw some sort of stat like this is the first time Nebraska will be going to a home game undefeated since, 2017 or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
It is crazy. This was an exciting, when we last talked, it was just before the FSU Georgia Tech game, which was the week 0 game. And now we've had the whole week 1 games as well. And there were quite a few good ones as well. College football's back. There's already been crazy plays, new penalties and rules that people are getting used to, all the new conferences and matchups. So a lot exciting this year.
Yes, exactly. And it just, I don't know. I think, and our Nebraska fan base is going to be more excited as well, just because we actually have the potential for some good things to happen.
That's true. So to toast this inaugural Nebraska victory for this season, we will go ahead and open up our cold beverages. I have one of my Golden Road Brewing Company Mango Cart beers.
Oh, you're doing the Mango Cart. So I'm doing a George Killian's Irish Red. This is the last of my Killians that I got, and it's in a bottle, so it's not going to quite sound the same, but cheers here, buddy.
Cheers.
All right. It's a good beer, though. Love this beer.
Now, it should be mentioned that you are still in Michigan currently, but you will soon be leaving to head down to the great state of Nebraska, and you're hoping to be there in person for this upcoming Colorado game.
Correct. We will be there for the next 3 games. So, Colorado, Northern Iowa, and Illinois. So I'm really looking forward to it.
He'll be reporting from the motherland. We'll get the inside scoop on what the fans are feeling and things like that.
There you go.
All right. We're going to start off with the discussion of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, which of course begins with our game against UTEP from week 1 of college football. And we gave our usual predictions on the previous podcast. We kind of reverse roles, because I was the one being a little more pessimistic, thinking that our defense would play well, but that our offense would struggle, that we'd have a lot of, first game jitters and penalties and things like that, maybe a turnover or two. So I predicted a lower scoring game of 24-10, while you predicted us scoring more, but also UTEP scoring more and kind of surprising us, 48-21. But the final score, of course, ended up being 40-7. So almost as much as you were thinking in terms of offense, but much better on the defensive side of the ball. Like you say, there's some positive momentum that hasn't been at Nebraska in quite some time.
Right. Well, and the thing is that you have to acknowledge, look at the opponent, recognize that it's a team that was, like 5 or 6 win team last year in a lesser conference and had a massive turnover, including a new coach and all that sort of stuff. But going into the game, there was some legitimate concern because of the new coach and what he was bringing to the table, along with quite a bit of the talent that he had brought with him. In this day and age where people can rebuild a roster in 1 year, those kinds of teams can be a little dangerous, right? And that unknown factor plays into it. But it sure felt like Nebraska was well prepared. Their defense, although we did, have that one kind of hiccup series, which was just a 3-play series where they scored their touchdown. And other than that, even though we played, I think Coach Rule said we played like 104 or 106 players or something in the game. So he literally pretty much full substituted his entire second team defense after the first series of the second half. Once we scored on that first series of the second half, he pulled Raiola and he pulled a lot of his first team defensive guys. So
Yep.
he went to the depth right away and didn't really miss much of a beat. I mean, yes, the other team started having a little bit more success offensively, but I still think their total yardage was, I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but if I remember correctly, it was just right around 200 yards.
Yes, it was 205 yards in total.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really exciting to see that kind of performance from your depth.
Right. Yeah, and you could definitely tell, like, between the combination of Harburg replacing Raiola and then some of the other switch outs on the offense, our offense definitely wasn't as productive. And like
Right.
there was a time where we got down right there into the end zone, like the 5 yard line or something, but couldn't get the touchdown and decided to go for the field goal.
Right. But that Harburg drive, that drive was like 13 plays. I mean,
Right.
Harburg did a great
Right.
job on that particular drive, and then after they scored, I think I don't know, maybe Harburg got one more series, and then they went to that deeper into the depth chart, and we probably had 7 different running backs carry the football.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we gave everybody a try at the running back spot.
Yes, yes. So yeah, I don't want to, I was a little disappointed with some of the things that happened once Harburg was out there, but I want to take into account, that was the second and third team guys. The game was pretty much in the bag at that point. We were just, kind of running out the clock and, like you say, giving experience to our depth. So that's not a true representation of how it would look like if Harburg was out there with the first team offense, in a live game.
Correct.
But yes, in terms of some stats, we had a total of 507 yards and perhaps more impressively, 72 plays, 36 of which were passes, 47 of which were runs. We passed it for 284 yards. We were 25 of 36 on that front. And then we rushed it 47 times for 223 yards, got 30 first downs to their 13.
That one. I love that. That's the one I love. 30 first downs. That's old. That's Nebraska old school there.
Yep. Had time of possession for 38 minutes in the game. We're 11 of 17 on third downs. Only had 3 penalties. Let me find that. Yes, 3 penalties for 35 yards.
Yeah.
Well, they had 9 for 76.
And keep in mind that I think 2 of those 3 penalties were on that first drive, which we overcame and scored.
Right. Well,
because it was a 2nd and 30.
Right. Well, was that the first drive or the second drive? I don't remember.
It was the first drive.
Okay.
Because we didn't score on the second drive.
Right. Well, because that was a moment of concern for sure. Because, like you say, we got 2 penalties in a row, got pushed back to 2nd and 30. And that's the sort of situation where I would say with under Scott Frost, even Matt Rule's team last year, we would probably get part of that back, but not all of it, and be forced to punt, in this series where we had been moving the ball quite nicely. But that's where having Raiola, right, comes in clutch, where he got most of that back, like 20 of that yards back, I want to say, on the first play, and then the next 10 on the second play, and then we were back in business and we scored on that drive.
Right. Well, and you always got to take into consideration who the opponent was. This is, this does not mean we're, a juggernaut or anything. It just means that we have capability. And now it's about, can we do that consistently, and can we do it when everything doesn't go great? When the offensive line has a breakdown, that sort of stuff, where one of our running back needs to make a really clutch block to keep Raiola vertical,
right,
and not crushed by a defensive end or something.
To your point, though, on that second drive of the game, that's where we had a little bit of struggle running it, and then we decided to go for it on 4th down at like the 40-yard line or so, and we didn't get it. And then they got the ball with some momentum, and that's where their quick-fire, no-huddle offense kind of caught us a bit by surprise, and they were able to score quickly and tie up the game 7-7. And all of a sudden, I, as a Nebraska fan, was like, is this where, the issues creep up, and then later we had that nice, I think the third drive was our nice drive down the field, and Dowdell, our running back, was having a great game so far. And then he fumbled it right on like the 5-yard line, as we were about to score. And then they got the ball, and I was like,
right.
So there was a period there, the late first quarter, early second quarter, where it looked like we might be in the same old, making stupid mistakes and giving them a chance to be in the game. But then our
Exactly.
defense came in clutch with a sack in that scenario where we had them pinned up
Right.
against our own end zone. And from there, we kind of took control of the game.
Right. Well, and that sack was for a safety.
Right. Yes.
And so we got the 2 points, and then we got we got the ball as well, and then drove down, scored, and now it's 16-7, and yeah, we're a little more comfortable. But I cannot let this pass, and I'm really mad at our. We got so much media at Nebraska. We should have had somebody that was smart enough to ask these questions, and it irritates me when they don't ask this kind of tough question because as you know, and anybody who listens to the podcast knows, I'm a huge fan of Matt Rule, and there's so many decisions, so many things he does that are like, dang, if I was going to be Nebraska's head coach, that's what I would want to do. I would want to be able to do it the way he's doing it. He's doing so much right. But the one area that I have questioned is his in-game coaching, right? That's the area where he still does some really head-scratching things. And I'm going to tell you that we went for it on 4th down at just a little beyond midfield twice. And we got it the second time, but we didn't get it on that first one. And to me, there was no the upside of getting that first down is, yeah, you sustain a drive and maybe you go in and score. Okay. But if you punt that ball when you're at the 45-yard line or whatever, then you have a decent chance of maybe coffin cornering the thing if you have any decent capability at your punting position. And you get them, starting their offensive series inside the 10-yard line or inside the 15. And worst case scenario, you punt it into the end zone and they have to start it 80 yards away at the 20. But instead, you go for it on 4th and 5. You don't get it. And then now everything's disrupted. Now, instead of the defense coming on the field because after a punt, you would have had a commercial break and there would have been some time for the defensive guys to gather together and have their little convo with the coaches and everything, and then get out on the field with a plan and everybody focused. Instead, when you go for it on 4th down, most of your defensive people, they're distracted. They're watching to see if we make the 4th down play or not. And so then, boom, it's quick change. There's not a commercial. They go right to the other team, and our defense comes out in that more non-traditional transition, and boom, 3 plays later, they score. And it's risk reward at that moment in time. I'm not saying don't go forward on 4th down. I'm saying not that early in the game and not when you're only up 7-0. And it's 4th and 5. It's not 4th and 2. It's 4th and 5. And
Right.
that was flat out. I'll tell you, I think that was a bad decision, bad coaching decision by Coach Rule. It's his call. That's his mistake. And if he continues to make that kind of a mistake, we're going to lose some games because of that kind of in-game coaching. That was a bad coaching move, in my opinion. Now, if it's 16-7 and you're in that situation, maybe you have a little bit more liberal use to go ahead and do that. But even then, I probably would say you don't do that. When it's 23-7, then I do that. Right? It's the old 21-point rule.
Right.
So, you just he made that risk, and because the problem is now, instead of us being in a comfortable situation where we had control of the game, because we hadn't been able to establish it up to that point, now you're giving the other team by having them score. Now it's 7-7 into the first quarter. Now, under normal circumstances, we're in a dogfight into the third quarter. Default by if 90% of the time that's true. Now we ended up having some scores and everything, and we overcame it, and we ended up with a good, comfortable lead at halftime. But to me, you don't do that, especially with a Nebraska team that's as fragile psychologically and mentally as our team is. We should have played more conservatively at that moment. So I'm really hopeful that Coach Rule learned from that, even though no one challenged him on that question after the game or even today in his Monday press conference. It's now already water under the bridge, and it'll only come up when he does it again, and it ends up costing us a game. So he cannot do that. So there, my rant is over.
All right. Well, to to add some detail to your rant, actually, we were 0 of 2 on fourth down because we went for it again later in the game when it was 40-7. So the game was, already over, and we had Jalen Gramstad in as our QB. So we went for it on fourth down there and didn't get it, which I honestly forgot about. Because, like you say, at that point, the game is over. Basically, that's a little more forgivable. I feel like going forward in that situation on the UTEP game was. Because we're at the 40-yard line, so it is a little bit of that no man's land where, you always hate it when if you try to punt it and you don't pin them deep, instead they come out to the 20. It's like, okay, well now
it's only 20 minutes. It's only 20 yards, right?
Right.
It's like
right. And it's UTEP, right? A team that is significantly less talented and size-wise and everything than us. So I get the feeling that let's put my guys in this challenging situation and see how they, rise up to it.
And they failed. They didn't, did they?
No, they didn't. That's true. And I would agree, when it's still early in the game and with a team that's as mentally fragile as Nebraska has shown itself to be, that is even more risky than usual, I would say.
Right. And your statement that it's just Texas El Paso, Nebraska can't say that about anybody. Until we are consistently winning 7, 8, 9 games a year, right? And we're always going to bowl games for 5 or 6 years in a row, then you might be able to say it's UTEP, right? But until then, no, you can't say that. Every damn game is a possible loss. We have found multiple ways to lose games where ESPN's the chance of victory tracker was at 99% in the fourth quarter, and we find a way to lose.
Yeah.
So we are not a team that has the luxury of having that attitude. And so, in my opinion, Coach Rule needs to rein that in a little bit early in football games. He needs to establish a little bit more control before he starts doing the go for it on fourth down crap. Because if he does that next week, in a similar circumstance, where we're at the 40-yard line against Colorado and we don't get it, I might end up in the hospital with a cardiac arrest.
Well, that'd be a problem. So let's not do that, Mr. Rule.
Well, exactly.
Now, once again, to the team's credit, after like I mentioned, the fumble that we had right on the goal line and those early penalties that kind of set us back. After that point, we didn't have another penalty in the whole game, and we didn't turn the ball over again. And Dowdell, who once again had a great game up to that point in terms of rushing the ball, I don't think he played another snap for the rest of the game. So I think Satterfield kept to his previous promise that if you turn it over, you're not going to play more because we have that depth in the running back room now.
Yep.
And I'm sure that he is being coached on that in particular during this week leading up to the Colorado game. And I hope to see him play in Colorado because he was showing some nice stuff in that early game.
And I think somebody in the media may contradict your thought. I didn't see him either, but I did read some reports that said, yes, he did go back in, but it wasn't until well into the third quarter, and he went in for a play or two. So I think at some point they did give him a couple more snaps just to kind of let him know, hey, you're not in some doghouse where you're never going to come out, but you need to understand that you're not going to be a guy we utilize and count on if you do that, right? So he needs to know that's unacceptable. And I think the message had been made clear. And, then the guys behind him went in and did well. I mean, both Urban and
Ramir and
Emmett Johnson. Yeah, Emmett did great. I loved that was probably the highlight play of the game for me. I know everybody else talks about some of the great pass plays that Dillon had, but my highlight was when Dillon audibled at the line of scrimmage.
Oh, yeah.
And then Emmett took it for like 40 yards, a running play down the field where he didn't audible once, he audibled twice, and he took the snap count down to like 1 second. I mean, that ball got snapped with 1 second to go because Dillon changed the play, then they changed their defense, then Dillon changed the play again. Actually, I think switched it back to the original play, and then it went. So I love that.
That would be a good play to analyze because right, we now have the helmets with the microphones, but that shuts off after 15 seconds. So I wonder, did
Correct.
Rule and the coaches see the first change and called for the first audible, and then, like you say, the defense shift back, and then Dylan on his own accord, because there was no longer the mic, shifted back to the original play on his own accord, and that was the play that got Emmett the big run. I'd have to rewatch that to see the
Yeah, well, and
timeline.
the actual timing. Yeah. Well, I think Rule said that I think they may have mentioned to him in the headset to say, hey, if you see this look, numbers wise, switch. And
Right.
so he was aware of it, but he then made the first decision on his own ultimately, and then he made the second one on his own. So yeah, I think it was already beyond the 15-second time frame. So
Okay.
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how different coaching staffs do that, by the way, because even Rule talked about that in his press conference today, his Monday press conference. He spoke about the fact that, the other team, Texas El Paso, young coaching staff, they were trying to, because they like to go fast. Their goal would be to be snapping every play before the 15 seconds even shows up, right? So they can talk with their quarterback and actually give him directly the checks, the audibles, all the
Yeah.
way to the snap of the ball, and so they were doing that.
There was a cool moment in the broadcast where they got permission from UTEP to put their, field microphone in the helmet to hear what the quarterback is hearing, basically. And they showed a shot of the coach. You could see him saying the words that you were hearing in the helmet. And it might have
Right.
been, the microphones both of in the helmet and in the field reporter's hands, maybe not being the best or whatever. But it was hard to hear even on the
Right.
TV, speakers and stuff. So it just
Yeah.
goes to,
Imagine
yeah,
being in the stadium, right?
right. Because, yeah, the Nebraska crowd definitely did get involved on a couple of plays on UTEP's side. I think they
Right.
had said like the most they had ever played under this quarterback was like 15,000 or something. So to go from that to Lincoln Memorial Stadium was definitely a big jump up for them in multiple ways.
Yep.
But that's something to keep in mind is that especially if you're in a hostile crowd, a hostile stadium, you might not be able to hear much of what your coaches are saying to you.
Yep, exactly. Well, and an intelligent crowd, which Nebraskans tend to be pretty savvy about the rules. I think it won't take but a few games for us to start cluing in that, it used to be that you waited until the team got up to the line of scrimmage if you were on defense and the opponent was on offense, and you would really elevate the decibel level so they would have trouble with the snap count, right? But
Right.
now there's reason for your sound level to be massive until 15, right? So they struggle to communicate clearly until that mic shuts
Right.
off. So it's going to motivate people to scream louder earlier in the play clock.
Yeah, that's true. Since you mentioned our running backs earlier, I've got the stats here. Emmett
Yeah.
Johnson had 8 carries for 71 yards. Dante Dowdell had 8 for 55. Ramir Johnson had 11 for 50. And Gabe Irvin had 6 for 24. But of note for Gabe, I would say we were bringing him in when we were right at the goal line, and he scored 2 touchdowns, I think, for us.
Yes, he did. Exactly. And that's the thing. So you can highlight his game with regard to the pay dirt, right? Hitting and getting touchdowns. But then Ramir, he had probably one of the most impressive individual runs where he created and was very deceptive in a run. I think it might have been in the third quarter, like that first series of the third quarter. But anyway, he had a run. It was probably only like 12 yards or something, but damn, it was impressive. And I mean, he bounced around. He was inside, outside. He spun and made a guy miss, and fell forward, and just did so many things that you want your running backs to do, and all in one play. And I'm like, that's why they like him so much, right? And then of course, Emmett had that great run, and ended up being the leading rusher. But he had like 40 some yards on one play, and he did a good job, but I give Dylan Raiola a lot of credit for making that happen.
Right. And we had 47 rushes for 223 yards. Well, they only had 24 rushes for 56 yards. So we really shut down their running game pretty fully.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about your favorite play being that Emmett Johnson play. The one that comes to mind to me was a passing play where Isaiah Nayor caught the pass from Dillon, but he was a little off balance, but he put one arm down, managed to stay upright, and ran the last the last 10 yards to get the touchdown. I thought that was a great effort. So that second effort got the touchdown instead of just getting you at the 10-yard line.
I totally agree. I was so impressed by that play too. That's cool. I hope that's just a glimpse of what's to come for the rest of this season with him. Man, it's a bummer that those guys are seniors, Nayor and
Banks.
Banks, thank you. Yep, Banks.
Yeah. Isaiah Nayor had 6 receptions for 121 yards, and Jamal Banks had 4 for 61. So they were the two leaders on the day.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That was really something. Well, and then the other one, the pass there right before halftime.
Right.
Oh, man. I mean, that was a great individual effort by Dillon, right?
Yeah.
Again, understanding the circumstance, the half's almost over. Even if I throw a pick here, it's somewhat harmless, right? It's likely somewhat harmless. So he went for it. And by golly, he got it, paid off.
Right. Well, and this will prompt a different discussion about the deep pass, which I want to have. But that one was a beauty because it was that type of thing where it's fading to the corner of the end zone, just where basically only our guy could get it, and he had a significant height advantage over the guy who was guarding him. So he just jumped up and got it. And it was one of those things where I've seen that sort of play, many times watching other teams, but in terms of Nebraska, it was like, getting water out in the desert, right? Like, how long has it been since we've seen a pass like that?
That's funny. I like that. Yeah, that's good.
But in terms of our run pass kind of balance going forward as a team, there's no secret that Dad and I are fans of the running game. We think that should be a core aspect of Nebraska football, no matter the era. And we've been in a situation where we've had a lot of these dual threat quarterbacks who have good legs and then, are okay at passing, but aren't the best, aren't able to be as accurate, especially if you're going deep and things like that. But now we have Dylan Raiola, this star quarterback who clearly can throw it deep and accurately. And so as a result, it's no surprise that, your pass rush kind of balance should shift accordingly. Now, as I mentioned in the game, we actually ran it more than we passed it, 47 runs to 36 passes, but that's skewed by the fact that we got into a pretty big lead by the early third quarter, and thus we're running it more just to kind of run out the clock, playing a bit more conservatively. Dillon wasn't even playing at that point in the game. So I don't think that's an indication of where Marcus Sadford ideally would like our balance to be in a full game against a tough team. So 2 questions for you, Dad. What sort of split do you think we should have? Should it be 60-40 in favor of passing, 60-40 in favor of rushing? And what should be our approach in terms of throwing the deep ball? Because we did throw it on first down, a few deep balls that didn't go anywhere,
Right.
And then he threw a few that did, but it's a balance, right?
Exactly. When you throw a deep pass, I mean, if you're connecting on 1 out of every 4, or maybe even 1 out of every 5, then that's saying something, right? The question is, depending on how many plays you get in this particular game, we got a lot of plays, as you pointed out earlier. Then you can afford to quote waste a few pass plays trying to hit the big one, right? But you can get too enamored with that and almost distracted, right? When there's opportunities that you could have taken down below for a shorter gain or whatever. I think that's something that will be a growing process, a learning process for Dillon all season. I think he has a tendency. He loves to throw it deep because he has a really good arm. And so he likes to take his shots. And as long as those don't translate into a bunch of interceptions, I think Coach Rule and Coach Satterfield are probably going to let him do some of that, right? Uh, but if it starts to be too much of a turnover prone situation, then he's going to be backed off. Now, as far as what I think the balance should be, it really depends on what kind of games we're in, right? Um, if we're leading in a lot of games over the next, 8, 9 weeks or whatever, and so we're trying to play time of possession, then I would say we want to be in that 55 to 60% run. If we're 60% past, I think that does not bode well for Nebraska being successful, meaning that will mean that we're behind. Because I think that what Satterfield's going to want to do is probably in that slightly more running than passing. So I'm going to say 55-45.
Okay.
55 run, 45 pass. I don't if he goes to 60% passing, even though we have great wide receivers, then I feel like that probably is an indication that we're in a shootout with somebody or we're behind.
Right. I guess so. Your thinking is like we have the ability to do that, but
Yes.
in an ideal situation, it looks more like what we saw in this UTEP game, where it was like 60% run, 40% pass, because we
Yeah.
get such a lead that we go into a clock management kind of formation.
Correct. And if you can do that, meaning you have the strength in your offensive line and you have the talent in your running back core to be able to do that and have success, convert on third downs. And, again, how many first downs do we have? 30, 31?
Yeah,
That's
30.
huge. That's the deal, right? So if you're able to do that, then you're running the football. But I will concede that we're going to face some better defensive lines than the one we faced this past weekend. And when that happens, our running game is going to struggle to have that level of success. So that'll motivate Coach Satterfield to throw it a little bit more, right, and to convert on third downs with the passing game a few more times. But ultimately, if we're having success and we're winning, then he's going to try to do that running the football.
Right. And yeah, I would generally agree with you on the ratio thing in terms of the deep ball. I'm still a little more old school, I guess, in that obviously you need to, if you have the weapon, you need to threaten it,
Yep.
to force the opponent to respect the fact that you can throw the deep ball, and maybe that opens up options for the running game, and it's one feeds the other sort of scenario. But there were a couple times in this game where Dylan was thrown into double coverage or in,
Yes.
kind of scary scenarios, let's say, that thankfully just resulted in an incomplete pass. But against a better team, against, Travis Hunter, who we're playing next week, that could easily be a pick. So I am concerned on that aspect of Dylan being a freshman, is him trying to kind of force things when he should maybe just choose the more conservative option.
I would agree. I would agree. That is a concern that I have as well. And I'm hopeful. He seems so savvy and aware of the circumstance of the game that, he maybe also was aware of, who we were playing against and all of those kinds of things. Right. So he took all that into consideration when he was making some of those decisions about what kind of throws he was making, because they've definitely praised him for his ability to check down and throw to the open receiver.
Yep, we saw that in the game.
Right. And one other aspect of the passing game that I'm quite excited about is, if you look at some of the things they already put on film, the things they did in that game with guys like Carter Nelson and Barney, that were just getting your athletes in space and seeing what happens, right? And even when the timing wasn't great or whatever, you could still see the potential of those kinds of plays. And so sprinkling that kind of stuff in, which generally is pretty low risk in terms of quarterback throwing, right? But has a great reward if you can get it in the hands of a talent like those guys.
Right. I want to talk about the defense a little bit. As we mentioned, we held them to just 56 yards rushing it. Passing it, they got 149, including that one big pass that got them the touchdown. But we also got 2 interceptions from them. So yeah, the defense played well overall. And I wanted to highlight that touchdown pass because I did appreciate that our guy was there with UTEP's receiver. Maybe he was half a step behind, but he was definitely not blown out or anything. And then he
Right.
turned his head to look back at the ball, and then he kind of lost his balance as he did so and kind of fell down. And so then the UTEP guy got the ball and got the touchdown. So I like that our receiver, or our defender rather, was right there with him and did the right thing of turning to look at the ball, because if he stays on his feet, then he's turning to look at the ball with enough time to put his hand up and potentially bat it down. So everything was good except for the end of the execution. So I'm hoping that guy is drilling that in practice this week and can show us how to do it the right way next time.
Well, and then in the second half, I don't know exactly when it was. I'm pretty sure it was in the third quarter. They had another circumstance where one of our defenders just got caught up in his legs with the receiver and fell down completely.
Oh, yep.
And the guy was wide open, but maybe because of that collision and whatever, created just enough hesitation in that guy's stride that he ended up getting overthrown in the end zone by their quarterback.
Yep.
But that's the kind of thing you can't have, right? I mean, I think it was just a 2-bunch set. It wasn't like it was a 4-bunch or something and there was picking going on, but somehow that guy got behind him, and then instead of being able to stay with him and defend, the guy tripped and fell. And that, as a defensive back, you just can't do that, right? You've got to have the ability and the athleticism to be able to avoid the strides of that other guy and yet stay with him. It's not an easy thing to do. Getting tripped up is a common thing, but at the same time, that's against Colorado, that's guaranteed 6 points.
Yeah.
Against any quality offensive passing team, that's 6 points. So we can't do that. That's unacceptable. And so there were definitely some areas like that where I cringed a little bit defensively. And it's just hard to know with regard to the running game. We did a really good job of defending their run, and our defensive line actually did a pretty good job of putting pressure on a guy whose offensive system was designed to get the ball out quick. And so he wasn't going to get sacked much, right? But we still were getting pressure anyway.
Right. And we got 1 sack on him.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So since you mentioned them, I think it's a good time to switch over to Colorado, our second game. Very critical game, as we mentioned on the last podcast. And Colorado got a lot of attention because they were the Thursday night game this past week. So they're really the only game that day and got a lot of coverage. And they were playing North Dakota State, an FCS school that has won multiple championships in that division. And they gave Colorado a good fight. Colorado won, but it was 31-26 with North Dakota State throwing in the Hail Mary at the end of the game and getting it to like the 10 or 5 yard line. Like they were just a little bit away from scoring the miracle touchdown. So as a result of that and our performance against UTEP, we are now 7.5 favorites going into the Colorado game, according to Vegas. Which
is horrible. I hate that.
Well, yeah, I have a note down here for us to not get overconfident, which I definitely feel is a concern. But I think, the guys will look at that tape of that North Dakota State game and see how Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and those athletes that Colorado has are very scary, and how easily Colorado scored on North Dakota State. With some huge pass plays and things like that at times. So it could very easily be a shootout between the two quarterbacks in this game, I think.
Absolutely. Well, the thing is that, Shedeur and his receivers, they're going to take a lot of shots, and they're going to win some of those battles. And so they're going to score some points. The real issue is, how does our offense do against their defense, right? If we get into a track meet, I'm afraid they may have one more, Sunday type of talent than we do, right? And ultimately, that's the difference. I don't want this to come down to our kickers. So we need to establish the line of scrimmage in such a way that we're able to dominate with our running game. So I would like to see somewhat of a similar ratio of plays in this game as we had in the Texas El Paso game, that 60-40 split you were talking about. I think that's what I'm hopeful for, and that does a couple of things. It shortens the game, so it gives Shadur and his offense fewer opportunities to snap the ball, right? And if we can sustain drives and get first downs and all that sort of stuff, but the key is you got to get the payoff. You got to get the points, right? If you have a bunch of first downs but you don't score points, then that's useless. That's just empty yards. So we need to score when the opportunities present themselves, but we want to try to do it in a more methodical, balanced kind of way, so that we're eating up clock and just building a lead over time. And that way, the few hiccups that our defense does have won't be the difference in the game.
Right. I do have the stats for that Colorado North Dakota State game pulled up here. Colorado is a bit similar to us. They only had 3 penalties for 30 yards, and they had 1 turnover in the game. So they didn't do too bad on that regard. And they had 504 total yards, but of those, only 59 were rushing yards. So that is a sign of concern for them for sure, that their rushing game was very ineffective. But on the other hand, their passing game was very effective. They got over 400 yards that way. Their receivers were clearly outmatching North Dakota State's guys the majority of the game. And North Dakota State got 449 yards on them. So that gives me the sign that in terms of our defense versus their offense, we should be able to shut down their running game. But the real concern is going to be the secondary, the passing game. So that's where we need to, show kind of our level, like we were just talking about some of our mistakes in the UTEP game. We can't afford to make those against Colorado. And our defensive line needs to be able to squeeze the pocket and give Shadur pressure, either by sacking him directly or just kind of collapsing the box around him, forcing him to run. That's kind of what I'm looking for on that side of the ball.
Well, number one, I'm going to tell you that they're going to have more success than 59 or 60 yards rushing against us. Not because our defense isn't as good defending the run as North Dakota State, but just because of the circumstance of the game. I guarantee you they're going to pop a few big-time runs against us. The question is how many times does that lead to points? And as far as the passing game, yeah, you're not shutting that passing game down. But hopefully you're causing them to make enough mistakes. And this is the game where we need to have 3 interceptions, right? We need to get the ball from them a few times, right? And maybe even take one back to the house, get a pick 6 or something like that. That would be huge in helping us create a margin of victory. But I think this one is going to be a knockdown drag out. I would love nothing better than for us to jump on them early, get a 14-point lead or something, and then the nighttime crowd of Nebraska just overwhelms them, and they start losing their composure, which they were prone to do last year, and the next thing you know, we're blowing them out. You know what I mean? That would be the ideal scenario in my mind. I don't want this to be close. I want us to crush them.
Right. And there's some interesting factors. Like I mentioned, they played on Thursday, so they've had 2 extra days of prep time during this week compared to us. But on the other hand, they were in a knockdown, drag-out fight to the end. Travis Hunter, playing on both offense and defense, literally was in every play except for 2. That was the stat I saw.
Right.
And whereas, we sat out our guys, our first-team guys, in the third quarter, right, and we got to rest them.
Right.
So I think that aspect balances out a little bit in terms of like recovery time or whatever. But the extra game planning time and the fact that Colorado did have a close scare with North Dakota State, I think is going to make them all the more focused in this practice this week. I could certainly see Dion getting down their throats and really kind of trying to motivate his team. Now, whether that works or not is going to be an interesting question. And that's why, to your point, I think it would be really great if we got out to a lead early, and kind of cause them to have the doubt of like, maybe what happened against North Dakota State wasn't a fluke. Maybe we do have problems.
Right. I think that's going to be super important, because otherwise the Nebraska fan base is still a China doll, and we'll get quiet and be sitting on our hands and not giving the energy to the team if we're in a tight match. I think there there's nothing better that Nebraska could do for not only winning against Colorado, but also building momentum for the remainder of our season, is to have a blowout victory against Colorado. Well, not even blowout. I mean, just comfortable, right? Right. If we ended up with a 21-point victory at the end of the day, and it was, 42-21 or something like that, then I think that would go a long way in causing Nebraska fans to believe. Again, I'm really happy with the result of week one, but I'll be a believer if we can find a way to win this one. Now, don't get me wrong. If we win by 1 point in a nail biter, I'll be equally thrilled.
Right. I would totally agree with that. I'll take it, the win any way we can get it.
Right.
And we highlighted on a previous podcast how we expect that Colorado's going to be aggressive going against Dylan Raiola as the true freshman quarterback, both trying to blitz him and also having, Travis Hunter out there trying to, hijack routes and trying to go for picks and things of that nature. It would be great for, Dylan to catch Colorado off guard and get one of those deep balls, in for a touchdown or something like that early in the game. But I also think he needs to be aware that this isn't UTEP. These players are much bigger, much more physical and all that kind of thing. And he won't have the same amount of time in the pocket necessarily that he did against UTEP. I did see one fan bringing that up as his one criticism of Dylan was that maybe he was a little slow to get the ball out in certain situations.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. In terms of predictions, I'll go ahead. I was a little pessimistic last week, but we beat UTEP soundly. So I'm going to be more positive this week. I think we are going to beat Colorado. I do think it'll be a higher scoring game. I think both sides will have some offensive success. But I'm going to say that since we're at home this time and we've got this new momentum behind us, we're going to win. So I'm going to say we win 41-24 over Colorado.
All right. That's a good score. That's a good score. I think it's going to be a little closer. I think it's going to be 34-29.
Okay.
Nebraska victory. Yeah, Nebraska victory, though.
All right. Well, we'll know if you're not yelling loud enough, Dad, so better be sure to bring your good lungs to the game, okay?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
All right. And then now we're going to switch over to the national side of things. Oh, but before we do that, quick note, the volleyball season, women's volleyball has also started. And obviously we followed that a good bit last year. And the women are out to a 3-0 lead, in their volleyball season. They had to fight both Kentucky and TCU, who are not pushovers, and they managed to beat them both 3-1 in the set count. So yeah, solid start.
Yeah, I would say solid start. We've actually won the 3 matches with one of our best players, one of our returning All-Americans, really playing poorly, and still not yet in stride, not in sync, and maybe battling a little bit of being under the weather or something. And so, I'm still hopeful that some of that offensive performance. We've been very kind of uneven, right? There have been individual sets where we've played really well, and then sets where we just pretty much lost it. And so it's early in the season. That's not uncommon, but we're not as crisp as I thought we might be, given the fact that we had almost all of our major contributors from last season returned to this team. And Lindsey Krause's back from injury, and we've added a couple of really talented people. And that's probably the biggest challenge, is going to be the chemistry that this team will ultimately have, and that mental toughness that they'll have, because we have so much depth, right? And that can be a blessing and a curse, because you've got people on the bench who truly expect and are good enough to play for all but maybe the top 5 teams in the country, right? And so if they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs on the bench, how long before that turns sour? So John Cook's got a heck of a challenge in front of him, but he's already gotten through 2 of the tougher early season tests. TCU's a top 25 team. Kentucky was top 10, and we really did pretty good job against Kentucky. But we still have some others. We're going to be playing Stanford and Creighton, who's a top 10 team. So we got some other top 10 opponents out there in the future before we even get into the Big Ten, which of course will be loaded. So it's going to be interesting.
That's right. And then one other piece of somewhat Nebraska-related news is that it's been reported that Scott Frost is going to be joining the Los Angeles Rams as a senior football analyst in the NFL. Scott's been pretty quiet in the past year since he left Nebraska. So nice to see him getting back into the coaching game, even if it's more as an analyst than a proper coach.
Well, and that's kind of the new path, right? When you're trying to kind of rehabilitate your reputation because it got diminished by a bad coaching end to a stint at a particular university or football team. I think that's the new math, right? That's the new method for kind of resetting yourself. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, Scott was a very creative and a very good offensive mind. He just got in over his head at Nebraska in terms of not knowing how to manage and deal with all of the expectations and requirements of being the head coach at Nebraska. He's naturally kind of more of an introvert, and I think the very public demands on the Nebraska head football coach just did not sit well with him and kind of overwhelmed him when things didn't go well early, and so as a result. It just kind of spiraled in a negative direction. I'm hopeful he can recover from that experience and end up becoming a great coach. I just don't want him to be a great coach at some other institution that plays us regularly.
Yeah, let's avoid that. And then just one kind of funny thing. We mentioned on the previous podcast this news story that Oklahoma State was going to add QR codes in the back of their helmets, the link to like their general NIL fund. Apparently the NCAA has forbid them from doing that, saying that's against the rules. But I saw comments basically saying like, well, this already did the job of just getting them in the headlines, both when it was announced and now when it's been announced that it's canceled, just to get the word out there about the NIL fund or whatever.
Well, I'm sure it gave them a little bit of boost, but had they successfully implemented that scheme, I think you would have seen almost every major football program that has an NIL presence doing exactly the same thing. I think it would have become standard operating procedure, and probably will be anyway, because I don't think, someone else is now going to research the NCAA's rule on that and figure out how they can skirt around how the rule is written and do it in a slightly different manner. Maybe it's going to be not on the helmet, but it's going to be on the jersey, or it's going to be on the sidelines in a particular spot or whatever, right behind the goalpost, whatever, and find out if anything like that is outside the definition of the rule. Someone's going to figure it out.
Right. Now getting to the big games from week 0 and week 1 of college football. On the last podcast, we gave our prediction for that Georgia Tech Florida State game. I predicted that Florida State would win a little closer of a game, 42-28, while you predicted more of a blowout, 42-14. But it ended up going the opposite way, with Georgia Tech winning 24-21 on an end game field goal to seal out the game in Ireland. So that was quite a surprise, a good first game to kick off the college football season.
Yes, I agree. And definitely a surprise. It just leads me to believe that that Florida State was maybe taken a little bit for granted. They were enjoying themselves maybe a little too much over there in Ireland.
Right. Well, I will say they have, because I talked on the previous podcast about how their second team guy from last year I thought was pretty good. But they actually have a new quarterback in there. I forget his name. He's got a long last name, but he's from Clemson. He was starting quarterback at Clemson like a year or two ago, and now is found his way to Florida State, but he did not have a very good game. Had some struggles. Ironically, their field goal kicker, FSU's field goal kicker, I think he made like a 49-yarder and then a 59-yarder, which was pretty incredible. So they got that weapon on their side at least.
Right. And I have a feeling they'll stabilize and they'll be good, but I think that they probably, now that we've seen them play, maybe they're not quite as as ready for prime time as they people thought they were.
Yeah. Now, in terms of week 1 of college football, the big matchup was Georgia versus Clemson, number 1 versus number 14 in the preseason polls. And it was a close game at halftime. Georgia was up, but it was only 6-0. So Clemson's defense had done a good job of slowing them down, but their quarterback was having his own struggles. And then Georgia really took control of the game in the second half. Clemson probably got a bit tired. And Georgia ended up winning that one 34-3.
Yeah, and I get a sense that Georgia ran the football pretty effectively in that game, if I remember correctly.
Yes, they definitely did.
Yep. So that's the thing. Georgia's gonna, if they're not already universally the number 1 ranked team, I think they'll get there fairly soon.
Yeah. And then this is kind of funny. Iowa, who was playing against Illinois State, was in a similar situation. They were only up 6-0 at halftime, but then kind of found their rhythm in the second half of the game and ended up winning 40-0 in a shutout. And now, obviously, it's Illinois State, so no one should be, blowing up cars in Des Moines yet or whatever, or in Iowa City. The fact that Iowa had such an atrocious offense last year, or like a historically bad offense, and now has changed their coordinator and was able to put up these sorts of numbers, it's something to keep an eye on for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think anybody who thought they were going to be as bad efficiency-wise on offense as they were last year wasn't understanding what kind of talent they have on their roster, and that was just historically bad last year. So, but the thing is, it's still obvious that they have a good defense. They put a goose egg on the board in game 1. That's a big deal.
Yep. Now, another big game was Notre Dame versus Texas A&M. Notre Dame was ranked 7th, while Texas A&M was 20th, but it was a home game for Texas A&M, so I saw quite a few people picking them to upset Notre Dame. But Texas A&M ended up throwing 2 interceptions, and the game was tied at a low score of 13-13 with only 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And that's when Notre Dame got off a nice short run to get touchdown and finally take the lead in the game, and then I think they stopped Texas A&M and kicked a field goal to kind of fully put it away. So it was closer than the score would suggest, but Notre Dame held on.
Right, and that's a huge early season game, really, because had Notre Dame lost that, I think that would not have boded well for them getting into the college football playoff. But I think that's a nice big step towards that for them now. But then alternatively, Texas A&M, they're now in a little bit of a pickle because they got an SEC schedule they got to play, and they already have a loss against a Notre Dame team, so their margin for error now is super tight.
Yep, that's definitely true. And then this one was interesting. Miami versus Florida. Big sunshine game down there, rivalry game. It was at home for Florida, but Miami crushed them pretty solidly, 41-17. There was a big interception that got taken back for a huge amount of yardage at one point in the game. And also Florida's quarterback got hurt in the fourth quarter and they had to bring out the backup. So, yeah, not a good start to their year. I'm already seeing some pressure on Billy Napier's head because he's now in his third year at Florida.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. And Miami has recruited really well, but their coach hasn't translated that into a ton of, win-loss success. So this is an important year for him, too. So this is a big, big win for Miami.
Mm-hmm. And this is interesting to us. Oregon, who is now, of course, in the Big Ten, they were playing against Idaho, and they won, but it was not dominant. It was 24-14, the final score. Oregon got 2 turnovers from Idaho, but also had one of their own, and they missed a field goal earlier in the game. So they had some situations where they were having a good drive, but then had to settle for a field goal, and then they missed one, like I mentioned. And Idaho as well, I think they had one of their turnovers was while they were in the end zone. So really, if a few plays had gone differently, that could have been a much different game.
Right. And yeah, and it was close late into that game. So that final score included a late score by Oregon. So and that Oregon quarterback was one of the front runners for the Heisman Trophy. Clearly, Oregon was picked pretty much neck and neck with Ohio State, and that was not what was expected, right, against a team like Idaho. So it'll be interesting to see how Oregon responds. If they continue to struggle in this second week, then the catcalls and concerns will really get loud. And I think people, including myself, who was kind of inclined to believe that Oregon against Ohio State game out at Oregon was going to be a critical game in terms of defining the future of the Big Ten Conference, and the two participants in the championship game for this first season with the new members. But Oregon's going to have to do better than that.
Right. Oh, interesting. So we're recording this on Labor Day, and I just pulled this up on my phone. Florida State, who we talked about earlier, is playing Boston College today. Kind of odd to have a college football game on a Monday. And it's currently halftime, and they're losing to Boston College 14-6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Florida State may have some issues.
Maybe. And then the Sunday game, the latest game, was USC LSU, and that was a great game. Back and forth the whole way.
It was.
Strategic by both sides. USC actually stopped LSU in the goal line, like they were within 5 yards of the goal line on fourth down. So LSU basically went for aggression early and came away with nothing. And as you saw, it turned out to be a close game. USC won 27-20 in an upset. It was on a neutral field. It was in Vegas, which is way closer to California, so probably more of a home game for USC. But that was a huge stop. USC also missed a 29-yard field goal that seemed very doable at the end of the first half, I want to say. So it was 20-20 with 1:47 left to go in the game, and USC's quarterback kind of came in clutch. They got a targeting penalty as well that helped them get close to the goal line, and they managed to score to kind of put the game away. So yeah, not the best start for the SEC actually this year. The Georgia game was a big win, but both Texas A&M and LSU lost.
Right. Well, and this is not the first year for LSU to lose one of these early season big matchups. So they, like Nebraska, have played some big time opponents early in their season, or conference games, and I think in some cases, and come away with a loss early in their season. And then they've a couple of times, emerged to kind of right the ship and then end up doing really well and then have a good record at the end of the season. So it'll be very interesting to see how LSU responds to this. I have a feeling they'll do fine. And watching that game, both of those teams look to have an awful lot of talent.
Yep. I was just watching the recap of it, but it was a fun back and forth game, close pretty much the whole way through. But yeah, I did see a lot of LSU fans being upset with Brian Kelly because they brought up the same thing you did, that he's lost a lot of these season openers and, can't seem to win the big game. Right. So even though he's recruiting well there.
Well, and he's winning a lot of games. He's just not winning all of the games, right? And that's the problem with today's college football. It hasn't changed, I guess, from even going back to the 70s and 80s and 90s when I was a young man. The pressure that the Tom Osbornes and the Joe Paternos and the Barry Switzers and all the traditional coaches, were under, right? Everyone except the ones who were winning national championships were labeled as can't win the big one.
Right.
So that's a very common theme.
Very much true. Some things never change, as they say.
That's right. Exactly.
There was one note that I took some interest in. There was a penalty, a delay of game penalty that was called on LSU. And it was for a new penalty that's been added this year, I guess, for disconcerting signals. And basically what it was LSU on defense, their linemen did a shift before the ball was snapped, like, where they hop one foot to the right all in a
Sure.
row. And USC moved afterwards, like their guy flinched. And so then LSU was pointing at them
Right.
for a false start. But the penalty was called on LSU because now that's a rule, I guess, that you can't do that if you're within 1 yard line of the ball.
Really?
Yes.
I guess I'll have to research that rule. I mean, there has been a rule in place with regard to, you can't disrupt offensive signal calling. Meaning, I remember a very controversial circumstance of that involved Nebraska back in the time frames where teams often would use a clap as a form of indicating to snap the ball, and Michigan State used clapping to communicate, or they claim they did a clap or claps to communicate something on their defense. Of course, it would just conveniently happen at exactly the same time that it might have been an indication of a snap count, right? And so this was Taylor Martinez. A couple of snaps went awry, right? They just went right past the quarterback because he wasn't even ready, because that clapping happened
Right.
early. Does
Well,
that make sense?
yeah, I mean, this was even an issue under Frost, right? I remember him complaining about
Right,
that.
right. So those are. I wonder if all those complaints have led to this new rule you're talking about, and they've put some meat behind it, because it
Yep.
was kind of an interpretation thing in the past. Sometimes it would get called, sometimes it wouldn't. So that inconsistency is not what you want from a refereeing standpoint. So they probably wrote some more language into it and detailed it.
Yep, that would make some sense. Now, looking at week 2 of national college football, the big marquee game is Texas versus Michigan. It is at home for Michigan. Texas is currently ranked 4th, while Michigan is ranked 9th. So big time matchup. Obviously, two blue bloods, two teams that were in the playoff last year, but did not actually play each other. So definitely going to be a fun one. Obviously, Michigan coming in with their new coach and losing a lot of their top talent that got them to be national champions last year. Whereas Texas, I'm not as sure how much talent they lost. But what's your feeling about that game?
Well, I think Texas did not lose much talent at all. I think Texas is, again, right up there with Georgia and probably Ohio State, is, top 3 or 4 teams in the country. And so I would tell you that I think Texas is the superior team and will likely win that game comfortably. But whenever you're going to play Michigan in the big house, weird stuff can happen, right? It's an awful lot of fans, even though Texas is used to playing in front of 90,000 plus. That's still going to be an environment that's intimidating for them. And so depending on if some things go Michigan's way, it could be interesting. But at the end of the day, I would expect Texas is going to win that game comfortably.
Mm. Well, I just looked it up. Vegas has the odds at minus 6.5 for Texas, so just under a touchdown. And both of them, they didn't play teams of much relevance in their first game, and they won both of them solidly. So, that doesn't tell us too much. I'd be curious if you've talked to Brian at all about that game, because I'm sure he's nervous going into that
Oh
one.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, and actually, even though Michigan's final score looked good, they actually were in a bit of a battle for a good portion of that game against Fresno State. So I'm going to tell you that, yeah, Brian fully expects a loss. I don't know if he expects Michigan get blown out, but I think he is objective enough to recognize that Texas is coming in here with a superior team with a superior talent, and it's going to take some special uh, Michigan big house inspiration for them to win it. So he's fully expecting Texas to win.
All right. Well, I'll go and be the contrarian here and predict that Michigan will win it narrowly. And I think they'll have to keep the score down, play well defensively to make that happen. So let's say that Michigan wins in a close one, 24-21 over Texas.
Mm. Okay. I also think that both teams have pretty darn good defenses. I just think Texas has a little bit more offense. So I would agree that it's going to be lower scoring, but I think that Texas ultimately is still going to score 35 points, and then Michigan is only going to score 21.
All right. I like it. And then there are some other good games next week. Nothing on that caliber. Obviously, our game is one that's getting quite a bit of attention, even though neither Nebraska or Colorado is ranked. The new top 25 has not come out yet as of Monday, but I doubt either team will be there.
Right. No, I agree.
Yet it's getting quite a bit of media attention, I think, because we've got the hot new quarterback. Colorado's got Deion Sanders. It's a big rematch. It's a rivalry game.
Right. And Shedeur and Hunter. I mean, those two, Shedeur and Hunter will probably both be top 10 picks in the upcoming draft, right? Hunter is being talked about as one who will maybe go as high as 1, right? Where Shedeur probably goes in the top 10. So when you got a team that is anchored by two of the best players in the United States, one on offense, one on defense, then that team's got a chance to do some good things and is going to get a lot of visibility because of that talent.
Well, what makes Hunter so crazy is he's on both sides of the ball. He caught a lot of passes in that.
Oh, yes.
In that NDSU game.
Yep.
Though I will say he's an amazing player, clearly, but I don't think he can keep up this playing time the whole season. Like if he's playing the majority of plays on offense and defense, like he's just going to wear his body down.
Right. He did that against last year against TCU and then us. And then I think in the very next game, I think they played Colorado State maybe or something. And he ended up getting injured in that game to a certain degree. Ended up, from that point on, he never played, the dual side thing nearly as much after that, right? He didn't have any of those games where he played, 90 or 100 snaps or whatever, where he did against TCU and us.
Yep, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But NC State are playing against Tennessee at home, so that one's a bit interesting. Iowa is playing against Iowa State at home for Iowa, so that'll be more of a challenge than they faced last week. So those are some interesting games.
Go Iowa State.
And then Illinois, who we had your buddy on, who was an Illini fan a few weeks ago. They've got a big game against Kansas. Now Illinois is at home, but that's definitely going to be an interesting one. And I know your brother Mike is probably going to be rooting for the other side there.
Absolutely. And that is going to be a very interesting game. Now, I mean, because Kansas was very, very excited, very high on their team this year. And I got to admit, Illinois surprised me with how incredibly good they looked in their first game. I mean, when you can put 40 on the board and keep the other team at 0, you're doing something, and that's just like, that's why I have to give grudging respect to Iowa for what they did. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. If you can have that kind of offensive success in your first game of the year, that means you were relatively clean. You didn't have a bunch of turnovers and you took care of business. Right. And to get that accomplished in your first game of the season is a huge, huge deal and reflects maturity.
All right. So there's not as many big games on the national side of things next week, but a few good ones like we've highlighted. Baylor and Utah are playing as well. That should be a good game. But the big one, of course, for us is this Colorado game. We've penciled it far before the season started, as this is the critical game that may determine, kind of the momentum for the season. Are we going into our next game, which is against one other kind of lesser opponent? Are we going to that high off a Colorado W, or are we going in, either disappointed from a close loss or bruised and busted from getting blown out? Obviously, I really hope it's not the latter, but it could happen. They, like you say, they've got two of the best players in the whole country, so you can't rule that out.
That's right. And they're going to be motivated, and they're going to have prepared a lot of things. And like you said, they had 2 extra days, so they're gonna throw everything but the kitchen sink at us. I guarantee you, it doesn't matter what Deion says. Okay, he wants this game more than any other game he's going to play this season. I'm here to tell you that this game is more important to him personally than any of the Big 12 games he's going to play later. And the reason I say that is is because of recruiting and because of the fact that the Nebraska name, right, that brand is going to bring more to him in the areas that he values, which is the visibility, the promotion, the hype, right? That this victory will matter more to him for that reason than any game. Because after that, you know, who is in the Big 12 that's going to have the panache of beating Nebraska?
Right.
Right. I mean, it's Kansas, it's Oklahoma State, BYU. Are any of those schools going to draw the kind of national commentary that a victory over Nebraska would? The answer is no.
Right. And like we mentioned, kind of a quieter week, so it'll definitely get some attention.
Yes.
Yeah. And you brought up something about Colorado's recruits, but that is very true for us as well. We've mentioned in the past how there are a few recruits and potential commits that will be present at the game. There was a new one announced just the other day, a 4-star wide receiver that will be there. So that is a great chance for us to show off how we've evolved as a team and that we've got Dylan as a quarterback, show those players what they can expect coming to Nebraska. So it's huge for us in that regard as well.
Oh yeah. This is going to be one of the biggest, home visit games that we have all season. So this is huge from a recruiting standpoint.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll be back next week, hopefully talking about Nebraska's W over Colorado and the bright future for our season. How does that sound, Dad?
I love that idea.
All right. Well, if you out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also search for us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you search for College Football Throwdown. You can leave us a rating or a review there. We always love listening to fan feedback. So thank you out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. Until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.